Hi, my name is Dr. Eliana Ramirez. I'm a licensed independent social worker and researcher of racial and LGBTQ related workplace trauma. I'm also a workplace abuse survivor. In the beginning of my own trauma recovery following workplace abuse that resulted in being mobbed out of a job, I went to LinkedIn and YouTube for videos of other workplace abuse survivors. And from the stories of other survivors, I was able to connect to a place of hope that carried me through the earliest and most painful days of my own trauma recovery. I wanted to give back to others. And so was very careful and intentional with paying attention to my own experience of workplace trauma recovery with the goal of being able to share with others what helped me along the way. So this is the first in a series of videos that I'm going to do sharing about my own awareness from an autoethnographic perspective, meaning using my social science training as a researcher to examine my own experience of workplace trauma recovery. So for people who are checking out this video who are living with blindness, I want to give a brief description. I am a light-complected mixed race Chicana of Mexican Irish Czech ancestry. I have long brown hair with silver streaks. My hair is in a braid over my left shoulder. I'm wearing burgundy cat-eye glasses. I have red lipstick. I'm wearing multiple silver hoop earrings and a silver ear cuff. I'm in a black button-down collared shirt, and I have a silver circular pendant necklace. Inside of the circle is a silver tree against a black background. I'm seated in front of a blank cream colored wall. There are plants behind me in small white and silver pots. And for a shock of color, there's a fuchsia pink orchid plant behind me that's in bloom. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this brief and do several short videos because I know that workplace abuse and trauma impacts brain function. So I'll start off by sharing a little bit about who I am, why the workplace abuse and mobbing was so devastating to me, and then two key pieces of information that helped to jumpstart my own recovery. Okay, so I had never been exposed to workplace abuse like this. I'd had experiences as a social worker where I was physically threatened by clients, where I was actually stalked at one point by a client. I did LGBT patient care at a large hospital system where my windshield was actually broken. One day I went to my car, there was no large tree branch or anything. So I do actually think that somebody broke intentionally the windshield of my car as retaliation against the LGBT work that I was doing. None of that kind of work experience of hostility, which is more than what most people experience at work, none of that compared to the injury that I experienced in a psychologically abusive workplace. I was practically a straight A student throughout my entire academic career. I received the highest marks in my classes. I was student body president as an undergrad, as a grad student. I started multiple student organizing groups in the workplace. I've had many jobs over my lifetime. I'm in my late 40s now, and every single job I've ever had, I received the highest annual employee marks possible, including at the job that ended up mobbing me out of my position. I did everything right. I got the highest degree possible in my industry. I became a licensed clinician, had phenomenal feedback from my clients, as well as my colleagues, my supervisors, and the people whom I supervised. It was in an abusive work environment where everything turned on its head. And unfortunately, I didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. Having worked with workplace abuse survivors as a clinician and as a researcher and professional coach for many years, I know that it is very common for people following workplace abuse situations, once they get out of the abusive workplace, to say things like, I knew it was bad. I knew I didn't want to stay here, but I had no idea how dangerous the situation actually had become. And I was shocked to find that they were willing to demote me or force me out of the company entirely. That happened to me as well. And I even after having done all this research, even after having provided therapy and coaching to workplace abuse survivors, I was still shocked by the level of devastation that I felt following my own workplace mobbing. And two initial pieces of information that helped to move me from a place of complete and total disorientation and shame. The first piece was a combination between listening to workplace abuse survivors telling their stories on LinkedIn through their LinkedIn posts, as well as videos, both posted to LinkedIn and YouTube. I found that these people were overwhelmingly really smart, articulate people with the kinds of values that I gravitate towards. They were kind, they were ethical. And in fact, the research literature reflects the same thing, that people who tend to be targeted by workplace abuse have subject matter expertise, get along well with colleagues, refuse to participate in office politics, and oftentimes are intentional or unintentional whistleblowers. That is, people who have the courage and integrity to say out loud that a law is being broken, that decisions are being made that injure vulnerable populations, whether it is a coworker or a client or a student or a patient. And the people who tend to abuse us are imposter leaders who have been promoted into jobs before they actually had the training necessary to manage others, before they had developed their own actual subject matter expertise, and or they have dark triad personalities, which means that they have a combination of sociopathy, the ability to injure other people and not feel badly about it. They have no conscience. Narcissism, they take pleasure off of injuring others and pursue their own sense of wholeness by causing other people pain or pushing down other people so that they can get ahead. And then finally, Machiavellianism. So this is the willingness to climb over others, to do horrible things in their unrelenting pursuit of power. Realizing that I was actually part of a group of people, of workplace abuse survivors, who are folks that I would want to be around, right? They're intelligent and they're kind and ethical. That helped to initially undermine the sense of shame and failure that I had. It was inappropriate shame and inappropriate sense of failure. I had not failed. In fact, I had done a really good job. And it was because I consistently created programs that had phenomenal results that people who were imposter leaders around me felt threatened by. That was a really important initial shift for me. The second shift came from learning that the same kinds of abuse tactics used in abusive workplaces are the same kinds of abuse tactics that are used in domestic violence, right? So researcher Dr. Hannah Scott shows that the same kinds of tactics like isolation, financial abuse, discrediting a person's reputation, those dynamics that are used in domestic violence to isolate and disempower an abuse target, to make them easier targets for ongoing abuse, same tactics are being used in abusive workplaces. The other thing that was really important for me to realize was that part of why it was so devastating for me as a workplace abuse survivor was not just that I had given every single ounce of myself to an exploitative work environment, meaning and I'm so embarrassed to say this out loud. It's so painful to say. I gave up evenings and weekends that should have been spent with my children, my young children, because they needed me at that time. I gave up those evenings and weekends for an exploitative job. And that loss of time with me was injurious to them. But even more injurious to them was the damage that was wrought by having been mobbed out of a job. It spun me into a very, very serious depression. I'm lucky to be here today. I'm here today because I refuse to allow my children to grow up in a world without a mother. And I'm here today because of you. In the beginning part of my recovery, I decided that I was going to put on my researcher hat. And so I became an autoethnographer, meaning that I started to pay very close attention to my own recovery, what was helping me heal and what was limiting my healing. The whole reason for this was so that I could someday use this knowledge to help other people experiencing workplace abuse. It turns out that nearly half of US workers are themselves targeted by workplace abuse or witness the workplace abuse of colleagues, both of which are associated with depression, with anxiety, with post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I, in a very early stage of my own workplace trauma recovery, decided that I was going to use my suffering to help other people. And this video is actually a key moment in that own recovery of mine. So, some of the things that helped me to recover were not just realizing that part of what probably made me a target of workplace abuse are things that I'm most proud about of myself. And that the reason why I was targeted by the particular people I was targeted by because of huge gaping holes in their own sense of competence, sense of value, and self-consciousness that they do not have the ability to form natural relationships of respect with their own colleagues. They know that people can see their cruelty. They know that people can see how vacuous they are in terms of their ability to connect in a meaningful way with other colleagues. And so they have to pull down people around them who are natural leaders, who are naturally liked by colleagues. And that the same abuse tactics that are used in workplace abuse are the same abuse tactics that are used in domestic violence situations. And research tells us that it can take, on average, up to 7 attempts to leave a domestic violence abuser. In the same way, the tactics of power and control used in a workplace abuse situation intentionally disorient and discredit the workplace abuse target so that they are isolated, more easy to abuse, and more easy to exile and force out of the community. It also helped me to start to get into the research on what happens to our brains and what happens to our bodies when we are exposed to chronic stress hormone flooding. It helped me significantly to learn about neuroplasticity. That is the brain's natural ability to heal itself by growing new neural networks between neurons in the brain. It also helped me significantly to learn about somatic practices, especially somatic trauma interventions. That is, the ways that we can use our bodies to heal our minds through activation of the vagus nerve. And activation of the lungs. We can help the brain that is stuck in a cycle of anxiety or depression to feel a sense of safety that allows for interruption of that stress hormone flooding. We can rebalance our hormones. We can rebalance the injury from inflammation, oftentimes that is associated with trauma. And so learning about things like like neuroscience of trauma recovery was extremely helpful. And in a future video, I will share the actual interventions that I used that were the most effective. Just as a quick teaser here, in the next video, I will show you my handy dandy little brain model, and I'll share with you the ways that our brain structure is literally changed by trauma. So if you're having a hard time with memory, with making sense of complex problems, of problem solving, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you look in the mirror, you don't even recognize yourself because you've gained so much weight, but your diet has stayed pretty much the same and your physical activity has stayed pretty much the same. If you're experiencing insomnia, difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep, the next video that I share will be talking about how changes in the brain are normal and natural from chronic stress hormone flooding, how chronic stress hormone flooding also changes our bodies, but also sharing the hope of recovery through things like neuroplasticity. I'll actually be showing you my neurofeedback cap that I use that help to jumpstart the neuroplasticity in my own brain. I'll be sharing with you other resources that I used to help heal the psychological injury to my identity, to my sense of value, and my professional post-traumatic growth as well. So thank you very much for watching, and hang in there. Healing is possible.